I had an opportunity to be in Pakistan in 2009, and at that time we were able to talk with some people who had come out from Waziristan, from the Miran Shah area, and they told us about the terrible realities they experienced with multiple drone attacks. They both have been witnesses, Safdar Dawar, and the other man chose not to give us his name. And we asked questions, and then Safdar Dawar, the head of the Tribal League of Journalists, said, now, Miss Kathy, excuse me, but I have a question for you. Do people in your country know about these drone attacks? And this was in 2009, and I sort of stammered, and I said, well, I think some of the academics, and he cut me off. He said, no, what I'm asking you is, do people in your country know about these drone attacks? Do they read about it in the papers? Do they see it on television? And I remember blushing and saying, well, actually, no. And then he asked me, where is your democracy? Where is your democracy? But you know, that was 2009. And I have to say that in the ensuing years, and not because anybody in the elites of this country have tried to put the information out before the U.S. public so that they can evaluate it and be part of public discussion, but because of the activism that's been sustained and supported and in many ways nurtured in this room, people do know. We've got 67 to 70% of the U.S. public war-weary and tired of the warfare. They don't know how to get the jobs out from under the control of the militarists. But people know that there's something profoundly wrong in being able to kill through this kind of robotized, mechanized warfare. So I think that we can all give ourselves a pat on the back and be very, very grateful for this chance to continue in one of the most important education efforts that could possibly happen in human history, really. So thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, for joining together tonight. I want to give everybody a reminder that if you wish to carpool out to Jeff City tomorrow, you could see Jane Stover and she could assist you in making sure you get a seat in a car. If you can come to the trial tomorrow, that would be great. Also, if people had wanted to make a contribution and weren't able to make it tonight, I think you could talk to Jane and she could help you figure out how to do that in the future. We want to make sure that if people have questions, comments, observations, criticisms, you get a chance to be heard, so that our friend who asked me, where is your democracy, would have a sense that we've got democracy alive and well here in small groups and grassroots forums. So with great thanks to everybody who participated tonight, let's hear a round of applause and thanks. Done so much to keep this Trifecta Resista movement going. It's got a microphone that will work if someone would like to use the mic. Do we have anyone who would want to start us off with questions, observations? And if you don't mind to say your name as well. Thank you. It's coming.
It's coming. You need to turn it on though.
Ooh, it may not be working though. They told me earlier it's turned on and it was working.
Trying to do something. There we go. We do have limited access.
Hello? My name is Hafiza Farouk, and being a Hindu, I'm interested in karma. And in case you don't know what karma is what you throw out comes back at you and sticks. So I'm a little concerned about this drone thing, and sooner or later somebody hacking into them, or creating their own drones, and then we've started something that's turned out to be a Pandora's box for the entire planet as a new style of war for the next century. I just wondered what everybody thought about this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of proliferation and the possibility of what they sometimes call blowback or karma, any thoughts? Anne, thank you.
Well, certainly the
well, the United States is proliferating drones all over the place. We're selling them. We sold $4 billion worth of drones to NATO just this last year. The Israelis just sold $100 million worth of drones to Russia. China has drones. I mean, drones are everywhere. Companies, we have over 500 companies in the United States of America that make drones. We train more drone operators now in the U.S. Air Force than we train U.S. Air Force pilots. Drones are the big industry, and drones are kind of, in a way, easy to do. And as everybody's kind of been mentioning here, if it's easy for us to do it, you can make sure that there are others that are looking at how easy it would be for drone strikes to take place in the United States. And one of the things that our friends in New York have been relentless in reminding Hancock Air Force Base personnel, where they operate drones that are flown in Afghanistan, is that the Air Force Base, which is now being renamed as the Attack Air Force Base. Well, if you thought there was a big bullseye on that thing before, because that's where drones are operated, just go ahead and name your drone base the Attack Base. We are doing some of the strangest things in the world. It's almost like, well, I hate to say a George Bush, but, it's kind of like the U.S. government is saying to everybody else, bring it on, bring it on. Well, somebody will, and it won't be pretty. And we're asking for it by using these drones.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question for the Colonel here. My understanding is that they're not supposed to, it's illegal for these contractors to fly these drones because they're not military. And then it strikes me that we're in real danger because of that.
Well, many of the drones that are being flown by the CIA, and that was generally the ones that were in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia, the CIA contracts out these things. In fact, one of the big contractors that was in Pakistan before the Pakistanis threw the CIA out of the base that was being used in Pakistan to kill Pakistanis, was our dear friends, let's see, what do you call them? Blackwater, Z, and now whatever it is this time. Yeah, the United States is using contractors to fly these aircraft. And as we talked when I was here earlier, there are contractors, there are companies, corporations that want to fly the drones in our own airspace. And the drone caucus that we have in the U.S. Congress has gotten passed in our Congress a law that by the year 2016, the FAA has to open up airspace to 30,000 drones to be flying in commercial airspace along the places where our commercial airliners are flying. Well, you know that there's a great outcry from the Pilots Association that certainly don't want these drones up there with them. I mean, there have been collisions of drones with aircraft in Afghanistan, where virtually the only planes that are flying are U.S. military planes, and yet they run into each other. There are planes that just fall, drones that just fall out of the sky. There was a Global Hawk, which is the largest of all the drones, that crashed in Patuxent Naval Air Station in Virginia about a month ago. We have drones that seem to fall out of the sky in Iran. The drone that had the most radar resistance, I mean, it was a stealth drone, and yet somehow, well, the U.S. military says no one shot our drone down, but somehow it landed in pretty damn good shape in Iran, and the Iranians are reverse engineering it, so they've got probably a pretty sophisticated drone now.
Thank you, Anne.
Hi, my name is Rich. I believe during the Vietnam War there was something called Operation Phoenix, and as I remember it, they estimated that there were 20,000 people assassinated under that program by the United States. mostly, I mean, completely, I guess, Vietnamese people. And it was done in person. So I don't think assassination is a new American policy. As far as these machines are concerned, these drones, to me, the major difference is that they can hover for periods, a long time. We're beginning to live in a surveillance world, and the mere fact that they surveil is not going to be uncommon, whether it's done with stationary cameras or with some other method. Surveillance goes back to the Civil War. It was done with aerial balloons. So I'm trying to get to what is the essential difference? Is this just a technological thing that these things are around, or is there an essential difference in these devices?
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that this has been going on before, and even though the previous presidents have issued executive orders not to do it, one difference is now not only is Obama bragging that he's doing it, is that the Republicans are accusing him of garnering support that he doesn't deserve by leaking information about how he's assassinating people. And unfortunately, it works. Unfortunately, he goes up in the polls when it ought to be. We ought to be calling, it's impeachable. It's impeachable. But they're coming out and saying it. And I think what this does, though, is it makes it really easy. There's some ways people have compared these drones to the cruise missiles and other things, but you don't have hundreds of cruise missiles in the air 24/7. This is carrying on old things that have always been with us, but moving it along in another direction. One thing that is very, very strange to me about this technology is, remember Orwell, and his talk about language and about euphemisms, is that we're done with that now. This is H.G. Wells. This is not George Orwell anymore, because we call these the drone flown out of Whiteman is the Predator, and the one step over that is the Reaper, and this is theological. This is not just spiritual. The idea that you have a president of the United States, you have a president, an emperor, what is the image of the Reaper? The Reaper is the one sent by God to the person whose time is up and says, "You're going." Not only does Obama, not only does he send the Reaper out to get the people that he decides, looking at his baseball kind of cards, these Reapers are armed with Hellfire missiles. When Ronald Reagan was around, the new weapon they called the Peacemaker. It's kind of euphemisms to cover up. But no, we are, and to enable our head of state to send a Reaper to rain hellfire on the people he chooses, this is a theological position. It's an idolatrous position, I believe. So, but the psychology of this is really, you're talking about the contractors and things, but the military personnel who do this, they wear flight suits when they're doing this. I just thought the whole idea of telecommuting is you do it in your pajamas. And who cares? But they're in uniform. They get wings. They're given flight pay, even though they never leave the ground. And they get post-traumatic stress. Again, they're 7,000 miles away from the war, but 18 inches away from the war. There's another way too. Louis Vitale, one of our co-defendants in many of these cases, was a fighter pilot, an eject fighter pilot in the Korean War, and he said he never saw a plume of smoke from his bombs because it moved so fast. Well, these drones, the Predator drone, the motor that it's made for, that uses is one that's designed and made for snowmobile. Makes the damage much more egregious.
Rich, I wonder if I could also add one other, by way of thanking you for your question, one other reality, and that is that the satellite technology required in order to operate these drones is a very sophisticated technology that maybe many other countries wish they had, but they don't. For instance, there are 49 countries, now 46 active in Afghanistan as part of NATO. Well, they all want drones. It's become such an almost command performance for militaries around the world, but they don't all have the satellite technology. So who's going to rent the satellite to the other NATO countries? The United States. And you see, this then gives the United States even more control, even over other NATO countries. And of course, China has their satellite, and Israel has a satellite. But this is pushing us into a control that's being concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer groups, fewer and fewer elites who have proven that they are capable of a ruthlessness and a recklessness that you would think would inspire other people in other parts of the world to say, up with this, we will not put. So we're driving a new arms race, creating proliferation, and with a satellite technology that is, of course, involving the resources, the ingenuity, the skills of the people in our universities. We don't need these satellites up in the sky. We need mass transit. We need to retrofit the housing stock. We need to take care of the elderly. We need childcare. So demand that the jobs we want are the jobs that create things that are good for people and things that people need.
Thanks for the panel for talking and being a part of this fantastic thing. I'm sort of a new resident here in Kansas City. I think one of the things that actually sustains the use of these drones is a myth. It's the same thing that sort of talks about the smart bombs and Tomahawk cruise missiles. It's the idea that we can select and surgically do what we're supposed to do, that we can wage war in this way that actually theoretically saves lives. And it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think that as long as we can continue to tell that part of the story, that it doesn't save lives, in fact, it makes things so much worse, and it's morally wrong, because we are erasing the distance between who we are and what we do. I was also going to ask you a question, though. Can any of our, and this is sort of about talking about Blackwater security and about the fact that these weapons are being operated increasingly by companies, not the U.S. military necessarily, but companies that operate outside of international law. I was wondering if anybody on our panel could comment about that.
Yeah, well, we have police departments that want these drones, and General Atomics is selling them to police departments, and the various, not just the Department of Defense, but the Border Patrol has drones. They're flying over the Mexican border and then over the Canadian border. Can't figure that one out, but why not? The Canadians won't let me go into Canada anyway, so I'll think a drone up there's okay. So, the companies are making a killing out of this. I mean, this is really the growth military industry now. It's drones. And universities are making a killing out of it too. Check around right here in Kansas City and see how many drone contracts there are in your universities. The University of North Dakota is the first one, to my knowledge, that got a big contract. They now have a university degree in drones and unmanned aerial vehicles, where you can learn to fly them up there, you can learn to maintain them. And I think you're going to be shocked when you find out that there are many universities here in Missouri that are taking the DARPA, the defense, the defense research money, which is the largest part of money for scientific research that we have in the United States. It's controlled by the Department of Defense, and it's allocated out to universities through their UARC funds, which are classified research projects. And dig around it, because you're gonna be shocked at what's going on right here in your own universities.
Hi, my name's Steve. You just touched on what I was going to comment about. I don't know if anybody remembers, but not
Steve,
too long,
thanks for using the microphone.
not too long ago, the Kansas City Star had a big article. I believe it was the Sunday paper. Kansas State is just graduating people out of their degree program, their drone program. And that's happening right over at K-State. They tried to touch upon the civilian aspects, but the undertone of the article is some of these kids have already been contacted about going to work for defense law. This could turn into a real insidious type situation in our university.
Else?
Kathy, I love you, but I'm going to disagree. I think maybe we had a little misunderstanding earlier in the conversation. I have in my hand an iPhone. This iPhone has GPS capabilities that are equal to anything that would be aboard a drone in essence. You need to add a couple more chips in order to get the decimal points to bring the GPS signal in. This was assembled in China. They already have our technology. The synthetic aperture radar systems for Lockheed Martin mission control systems for General Atomics are being built and assembled in China, Malaysia, Korea. They already have our technology because we don't build it. This is the problem. The proliferation has happened. They have this technology already. And the fact that they don't need to put up any satellites because this phone built in China has GPS built in. They can use our own. If they ever choose to come back, if it ever comes back to roost on us, they'll just use our own technology against us.
Thank you.
I had to step outside for a few minutes, so if this has been covered, shut me down. But I talked to Brian Terrell a couple of months ago, and you brought up the issue of drone operators sitting in Whiteman or Syracuse or Las Vegas or wherever, in some legal technical sense, bringing the battleground to the United States, and we don't seem to have to worry about that for just practical reasons that other countries aren't doing this. But I was just wondering if any of you have comments on that legal sense of things.
Yeah, others on the panel might have, especially lawyers, might have more to say on this. But one of the things that happened at sentencing after our trial in Syracuse is the judge, this is a township judge, and the situation in Syracuse is it's an Air National Guard base that really is, you wouldn't know it was anything military, really. It's some buildings stuck on the end of the commercial airport in Syracuse. Hancock Field is the commercial airport. The National Guard wing, the National Guard has a wing there that they're just changing the name from a fighter wing to an attack squad, which is great because, as Ann was saying, they're not fighting anymore, they're only attacking. But our judge, who was an older guy, a Republican, we know because it was an election year and judges are elected there, and his campaign stuff was all over town. One of the things, this is after many, many hours, like 40-some hours of testimony, the judge kind of blew up at one of us and said, "Do you think that I like living near ground zero?" And I had a shiver down my spine because I really realized that Judge Gideon got that even more than I did, and that he was really scared. And what he was talking about, what we got through to him, is when you have these uniformed soldiers who are in real time engaged in combat, they are legal military targets. They are legitimate. They're taking part in combat. And if you Google articles recently about drones, when they interview people from the Air Force, they'll say, "I'm Captain Tom," "I'm Staff Sergeant Bali," and they say they don't give their names their last names because of security purposes. And that's because these are combatants who are involved in combat. That if somebody were, God forbid, to attack one of these places, and in places like Syracuse, it's in the middle of suburbia, that's a legitimate military target. That is, if things could go the way they could possibly go with Pakistan, things going the way they could possibly go with Iran, if one of these governments involved in war with us decides to bomb Syracuse, New York, to take out the drone operators who are actually fighting in their countries, is that legitimate? Lots of people say yes. Enough people say yes, think that's true, that the military is actually afraid of that. So this is just one more way that the war is coming home. One more way that the battlefield is no longer a place far away in another continent, but that it's right here in our midst. One of you lawyers might.
I'm aware that many will have a long drive ahead of them to Jeff City tomorrow, so maybe we could agree this will be the last question or comment, and then call an end to what's been a very worthwhile evening.
Thank you. My name is Dale Kuhn, and I'm involved with Veterans for Peace. I think that our scope of this problem is too small. We drive down the street, and at stoplights there are cameras. There are cameras on the backs and front of police cars that record our license plates. So the drones are just the beginning. I am very suspicious that my telephone is tapped. And I hope they hear some of the jokes that we pass along. But I wish that we would get the Constitution out, take a look at the Constitution, and there is a word that doesn't appear there that should appear there and will appear in the future, and that is revolt. There is a new book printed and on the shelves now called Destruction Today, Revolt Tomorrow by Chris Hughes. And I suggest that you read that book.
I mentioned to you that there was an antecedent to the group on Cairo where Voices for Creative Nonviolence, and when we were Voices in the Wilderness, many people would come and help me take care of my dad. My dad lived with me for the last 8 years of his life, and you might say Voices embezzled from Kathy Kelly's father, but it was all a very copacetic thing. Dad's pension and Social Security paid for the rent, and we all took very good care of my father. But as happens with a person, as they reach the kind of twilight years of life, my father would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, and he'd call, and I'd know to go running. I'd hear, Cass, and I go, what is it, Dad? What's the matter? And he'd sometimes say, it's not right. And I'd say, what's not right, Dad? What's wrong? Those kids over there in Haiti, they shouldn't be starving to death. And then another time, Cass, yeah, Dad, what's wrong? Those kids you go to see in Iraq, those little kids shouldn't have to go to bed hungry every night. And then another time, and he was a World War II veteran, Cal, yeah, Dad, what's wrong? We shouldn't have dropped that bomb on Hiroshima. We shouldn't have bombed Nagasaki. And so there we were, two people with more questions than answers, holding hands. And I think we are that way. We're people who know we're asking the right questions, we're searching for the answers. If you ever had the chance to read the book Kite Runner or see the film, I can guarantee you with experiences now being so fortunate to be with young people in Afghanistan, you could go to 2millionfriends.org, that's their latest endeavor. They really mean it when they quote Hassan, the one who was so full of forgiveness even though he'd been treated brutally. Young Hassan, an old Hassan at the end of his life, kept saying, "For you 1,000 times over." I know I can't begin to comprehend and to grasp what that means, but let us go forward with that sense. Love from a distance, and for you 1,000 times over, and for the children. Thank you.